come to this now. As economic pressures continue to strain South Africans' wallets, consumers are increasingly cutting down on unnecessary spending. So according to the One Life Generational Wealth Survey, 88% of respondents have cut down on extras such as family leisure trips, eating out, or even buying expensive clothes. In light of this, nearly half of those polled say they're saving for tougher times. But to unpack this, we're now joined by One Life Money Coach. That's Hayley Parry joining me, of course, this morning. And Hayley, thank you so much for your time, and good morning to you. Let's talk about the survey. I found it quite interesting. Of course, those lucky enough to be employed at the back of the 42% unemployment rate, at least those you've spoken to saying, listen, we've decided to kind of change course here and really be intentional about saving. What has the survey found?
Yeah, we've got some great news sitting in this survey. I think the number one thing that stood out for me is that 90% of people are looking at ways to save for tougher times. So they're looking at investments, they are looking at insurance, and they're looking at putting aside money into an emergency fund. And when we're looking at building generational wealth, these are critical steps on that journey. And so the fact that people are starting to be proactive and realizing that this is a DIY job, you know, they're going to have to help themselves in what is, let's be honest, a really tough time for most consumers at the moment.
And Hayley, that's good news, right? Because it seems that according to the survey, it's a 12% increase from the previous year's survey.
Yeah, I mean, the momentum there in the right direction is really encouraging. You know, it means that people are understanding that getting on top of your personal finances is critical to managing this. You know, I've spoken before about the importance of controlling the things you can control. So when you're sitting in an environment where you've got rolling blackouts and the cost of living is rising around you all the time, it's so important to focus on the things we can control. And this is exactly the kind of thing that we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, people were also really positive about the importance of teaching their children to manage money.
Yep.
Now, if you're talking about building generational wealth, this is a critical step, right? You've got to make sure that if you're working really hard to build assets to pass down to the next generation, that next generation actually knows how to manage not only their assets, but their money too. So the fact that we've got just under half of people who are proactively and preemptively doing it, that is also a really, really good sign for me.
Hayley, are you also seeing an increasing shift in attitudes and beliefs as well as efforts made by South Africans in terms of creating and maintaining generational wealth? I mean, oftentimes there have been myths that generational wealth is just for the privileged few.
Yeah, I think people are understanding that this is, like I said, it's a DIY job, right? And so what that looks like in your personal context is going to be different for everybody. And that's where it becomes empowering, because what generational wealth looks like for me will be different to you. But the point is that I can get on top of it by taking some concrete steps towards building assets that I can pass down to the next generation. And what we need to do a little more as well is just help people understand, you know, that there are key things that can help you do that. I've spoken about the importance of financial education. You know, one of the other key elements is looking at life insurance. And I think there's still some confusion around the role that life insurance plays in creating generational wealth. You know, there's this misunderstanding that it's there if somebody dies, you know, life cover is there simply to pay off some debt and buy some groceries and some clothing. But the reality is it's one of the most important tools in your toolbox to build generational wealth, because when families are at their most vulnerable, not only emotionally, but also financially, having a financial cushion where your family can actually earn an income from the life cover that they receive and then invest is one of the greatest gifts that you can give the next generation when you're no longer around. And so, you know, there's lots of positives, and this is one of the things that I think we need to work on helping people understand that there are other tools that they can use to help them build generational wealth too.
Right. I'm also equally keen to know where the increases are that you've identified within the survey, say when it comes to life insurance, investment, property, savings and investment. Can you share some of those stats with us in terms of whether there's been an uptake, an increase? Are people considering that compared to, I suppose, what, entrepreneurship or even tertiary education?
Yeah, so we have seen an increase in that space, as you say, around looking at things like investing in property, in assets, and education, as you say. One of the figures is that people have seen that there's been a 27% drop in life insurance, in people understanding that that's one of the easiest ways to build generational wealth, and that's obviously disappointing. So we need to, as I say, flip that around. But like I said, we've got 50% of people who are seeing the importance of teaching their kids how to manage their money. We have seen 88% of people cut their unnecessary spending. And we've got 49% of people proactively building an emergency fund. So there have been a lot of shifts. There's been a lot of movement in the right direction. And it is really heartening to see that, because most of the time we're talking about fairly depressing financial statistics around us. And so the fact that people are taking control, taking back control, realizing that this is something that they need to do for themselves and for their families is really very heartening.
Yeah, I suppose in my last question to you before I let you go, one last tip that you can give to our viewers in terms of where they can begin. If they're saying, listen, Hayley, we're going through tough economic times, there's high inflation rates, fuel prices going up, load shedding is affecting our businesses and livelihoods, but we want to start. We want to start somewhere with the little that we have. How can you advise we do so?
So the number one step in that scenario is, I would say, make sure you have an emergency fund. So even if you can only put away a little bit of money every month, it's really important that you have a financial buffer, because we've seen what the world is throwing at us, and then we've got ourselves and our little emergency fund, which is the buffer between our bank accounts and all these things that are coming in our direction. And being intentional about putting money into that is a critical first step before you can start looking at improving your cash flow, getting rid of debt and building wealth. This is the first step on that journey. And it might not feel really exciting, but once you can tick that off your list, then you can start moving to the fun stuff. That's when we start looking at what can you do to manage your money better, so that you've got a little bit more money to save and invest and start building wealth.
Oh, Hayley Parry, thank you so much for talking to us right here on the South African Morning Money Coach at One Life's Truth About Money, touching on very important aspects of creating generational wealth. Yes, we know the numbers are staggering when it comes to unemployment rates in the country. Most saying, listen, with what money can we save? But you can take the agency back. The little that you have, that's where you can begin. It's not only for the privileged few, as myths around generational wealth have previously peddled in society. You can start, but the important thing is just doing it, starting. All our thanks to Hayley Parry for her time.